Welcome to Groovy and Grails programming from jpassion.com. Today's topic is domain class relationships or associations. So let's move on with the presentation. So these are the set of topics that we are going to cover. So we will see what is and why we want to use relationships between domain classes. And we are going to spend most of our time looking into what is called the cardinality relationships. Cardinality relationships include one-to-one, one-to-many, and many-to-many relationships. And we are going to take a look at cascading updates and deletes. And we'll talk about eager and lazy fetching, which has a performance implication. We'll talk about composition relationship. And lastly, we will talk about inheritance relationship. So let's talk about relationships, the concepts of relationships first. So relationships define how domain classes interact with each other. And as I said, there are different types of relationship, and the most prominent relationship type is cardinality relationship, which includes one-to-one, one-to-many, and many-to-many, and composition relationship, and as well as inheritance relationship. Again, we're going to spend most of our time looking into cardinality relationships. So what is the reason we want to use relationships? It has an impact to persistence behavior. For example, cascading of updates and save and delete. Meaning, if you save a parent object and the child objects that is owned by that parent object will be automatically saved, updated, or deleted. It will have an impact to locking. We'll talk about persistency locking, pessimistic locking, and optimistic locking in another presentation. It has implication to performance regarding fetching strategy. We'll talk about fetching strategy later on, and caching as well. And also has an implication to table construction. So if you choose a different inheritance strategy, the tables are constructed in different ways. So again, we'll take a look at that as well. So how does a relationship is represented in Grails? So pretty much all persistency technology has their own way of actually representing a relationship in Grails. You are going to use static properties in your domain class to represent relationships to other domain classes. For example, in this case, we have a project class and it has an attribute or property called the project name, and then the rest of these static properties represent relationships. So here we have has one relationship to project manager, meaning one project has one project manager, belongs to, this project belongs to portfolio, and this project has many milestones and many members. And here, this is an array, so you can have a multiple items in this array. And the first one is a property, and then this is a type of that property. So in this case, you can think of project class has a milestones property, which is a type of milestone. So again, why use relationships? From a developer standpoint, usage of relationships result in a lot more compact code. So without using relationship, it's your responsibility to maintain the relationship yourself manually. By using relationship, the relationship management will be provided by the Grails framework. For example, cascading updates and deletes are also possible by using relationships. So in this example, let's say we have a book object. We are going to actually perform find by title, and then we have a book object. And then this is a very compact code that you can write. Here you can add the authors. Let's say book has authors. So book has an authors, the author and book has one-to-many relationships. So here you can say, I'm actually adding authors. So in this case, I'm sorry, I actually said incorrectly. In this case, book and authors have one-to-many relationships. So in this case, a book has many authors. Okay, so here you are adding author 1, author 2, and author 3. So we have 3 authors for this book, and you can just code like this, and then you can just save it. Okay. So in this case, when the book object is saved, these new authors, also actually being created. I mean, you know what? Yeah, so I think I actually have incorrect code. I should have actually new author. I'm supposed to create new author object here. So this code is incorrect. Okay, so what the point is that whenever you are saving this book object, these new author objects are also going to be saved, and that's called the cascading save. Okay, so we'll actually take a look at this one, looking at the working code later on in the hands-on lab. All right, so let's talk about the one-to-one relationship first. Before we move on to cardinality relationship, let's talk about directionality and navigation first. So directionality affects the navigation. So you could have unidirectional relationship or bidirectional relationship between the two domain classes. So in this case, unidirectional example is the customer can call get address, but from the address, there is no customer property, meaning it doesn't have get customer method. So if it is not allowed, if this is not allowed, then this is the unidirectional. In this case, customer and address has one-to-one relationship, but it's unidirectional because you can actually go to the address only from customer object. In this case, customer has many orders, so this is a one-to-many relationship. And in this case, if you can call get orders, but you cannot call get customer from order, then again, this is unidirectional. Same thing with many-to-many relationships. So if you say speaker to get events, so you can go to events from the speaker, but if you cannot go from the other direction, then it's unidirectional. And of course, bidirectional is that you can actually go either direction. Let's talk about the concept of ownership. Now, we are going to actually talk about the ownership a bit more detail using the example later on. And who's the owner in the relationship? It actually has an impact in terms of how things get persisted. So so there is a concept of ownership. Who owns the relationship affects how objects are persisted. So, for example, owner can do cascading persistence while owned cannot. So if you actually go back to the example of this, so in this case, the book is the owner, and owner can actually cascade new authors, okay? But it doesn't work the other direction. So ownership, who is the owner, is in fact has an impact in terms of how persistence behavior is actually being performed, especially from cascading standpoint. Unidirectional is that ownership is implied. However, in bidirectional, ownership needs to be explicitly specified, meaning which side has an ownership. And you will see later on how ownership can be specified in Grails using those static properties. So the side who owns the relationship has a foreign key field. So if you are using like a one-to-many relationship, then the many side that contains a foreign key field, that's the owner. So in this context, so the owner is called owner of the relationship, and the other side is called inverse owner of the relationship or owned of the relationship. All right, so let's talk about one-to-many cardinality relationship first. You have two different options in this case. So depending on which option you use, the owner could be different, which means the cascading persistence behavior could be different. So let's talk about the usage of belongs to. Okay, so let's say we have a student, and student have an address, and address belongs to student. Okay, so in this case, address has a student property. Okay. In this case, if you're using belongs to like this, in this case, student is the owner, while address is inverse owner or owned. So in this case, what you can do is you can create a new address object and then save. what that mean in this case, what happens is that the cascading save will happen. So both student and address object will be saved. However, if you try to this is going to cause an error. So you cannot actually do create student and then create address and save. Okay. So this behavior is not allowed in this context because the student is the owner. Now, if you want to have the other side to be the owner, then you're going to use the has one. So in this case, address is going to be the owner, while student is owned or inverse owner, and the behavior is going to be different. Okay. All right. So in one-to-one cardinality relationship, we have two choices like this. All right. So let's do our first exercise. One-to-one mapping. So from this point on, we are going to use Eclipse IDE as IDE of choice. You can certainly do things at the command line as we have done in the past, but usage of IDE is going to make your life a lot easier, especially when you have to stop the server and restart the server and things like that. All right, so let's actually create new project called the relationship app. Okay, so I'm going to create new Grails project, and I'm gonna call it project name is relationship app. I can just use the default location, or I can use whatever location I want. If you want to use the different location, then you also have to actually specify the name of the project like this. Okay. All right. So I'm gonna use the default location. So it's going to create a project. All right, now we are going to create domain classes. Okay, so you can certainly use create domain class. In this case, the package is CompJPassion, and the name of the domain class is student. Okay, so I'm going to create student domain class using Eclipse IDE. All right, so the project is created. So I'm going to create a domain class, new, and domain class, and CompJPassion, and what's the one I'm creating? Oops. Oh, student. Okay. All right, so I'm creating student domain class, and what we are going to do is we are going to try the belongs to option. So the first option. So we are going to create the properties, name, age, and address. Address is the owner, owned in this case. So I'm going to change. Okay. And oh, I have two of those, that's why. I don't have address yet, so we have to create the address domain. Okay, so let's create the address domain. So here, I'm going to go here. I can create domain and domain class, and we're going to call it CompJPassion and address. Finish. And we are going to add city and zip code and belongs to, and so we are building one-to-one relationship between student and address using this belongs to property. Okay. All right, so we created two one-to-one relationship between address and student. All right, so now let's create the a controller. So let's create the on the student controller. So here I can just select this domain, and then I can create controller. So it already knows what I chose. So I'm gonna just say finish. So we created controller. And then we are going to add some code. So here we are going to actually add a method called the create student. So here we are going to create address object, and then we are going to create a student object using that address, and then we are going to save. So when student object gets saved, you will see both address as well as student objects are persisted. Okay, so this is a cascading persistence. Okay. So I'm going to just copy this code. Okay. All right. Save. And let's run the application. So you can actually click either this one or this one. So if you click the command history, you can actually, it give you the command line here. And this is run app. So I can just press enter key, and then it's going to start the application. Okay, so I'm starting the application. So once the application is up and running, it will give me a link. So I can just click this one, and then it should give me this standard Grails UI. So let's try that. All right, so that's what we see. Okay, all right. Now, we are going to create a new student by calling the new method that we have created. So that's the student, this create student method that we have created in student controller. So we are going to call this URI, so student and create student. So basically, you can see student sanction has been created with the address object. Okay, so let's just click this one, and it should have this message. And basically all we do is, just displaying a message. Okay, we're not really doing anything fancy. All right, now we can verify the student record as well as the address record in address table. So let's go to DB console. So here, and connect. And you can see we have two tables, address and student, right? So let's take a look at the address first. So you can see it does have CD and zip code, and version is being used for the optimistic locking and ID. Now, if you take a look at now let's take a look at the student. So you can see student now has address ID. So the owner of this relationship is student, and which have a table that contains the foreign key field is the owner. Okay. All right. So basically it verifies that the cascading from the owner object save is being propagated to the child object, in this case the address. All right. So that is exercise 1. So we just did that. So if you actually refresh the browser, it will trigger the creation of the same student. Now, if you actually take a look at the student, we actually have a name. It has to be unique, right? So if I call this one more time, where did it go? So I can just use this link. Yeah, then it will fail because that is the uniqueness. You can see that is actually it's not unique message. Yeah, here you go, student name unique error. Okay. All right. So what we are going to do is we are going to yeah, we just did that. Yeah, so we just did this. So we're going to actually add another method called the delete student. So delete student is basically find a student by name, in this case sanction, and then delete. Now, what we want to verify is that when I delete sanction, a student, the address that is associated with this student also needs to be deleted. Okay, so that's something that we are going to